Alara Whitman stood at the edge of the sidewalk, staring up at the glass tower in front of her. Her fingers tightened around the worn leather folder pressed against her chest. She checked the time on her phone. 8:47 a.m. Her interview was scheduled for 9 o'clock, 13 minutes left. The morning air carried the smell of fresh coffee and the steady rhythm of footsteps from people heading to work. Everyone around her seemed to know exactly where they were going. They walked with purpose, eyes forward, lives already in motion. Alara stayed still. She couldn't afford to be late. Not today. Not for this. For 4 months she had been unemployed. 4 months since the marketing firm she worked for shut down without warning. One day she had a desk, a paycheck, health insurance. The next day she had a cardboard box and a polite email that said, "We regret to inform you." Since then, everything had slowly unraveled. Her savings were gone. Her checking account barely covered groceries. A bright orange eviction notice was taped to the door of her small apartment, 30 days to vacate. No extensions, no exception. And then there was her mother. Her mother needed heart medication every month. Expensive medication. Without insurance, it cost more than Alara could manage. She had told her mother not to worry, said she was between opportunities, said everything would work out soon. They were gentle lies, the kind you tell to protect someone you love. But every lie weighed heavier than the last. This interview wasn't just another opportunity. It was the last one. Alara straightened her jacket and took a steady breath. She was qualified. She had experience. She had worked hard her entire life. All she needed was a chance to sit across from someone willing to listen. She took one step toward the building, and then she heard it. Crying. Not loud, not dramatic, just soft enough to cut through the noise of the city. Alara stopped. It wasn't the sound of a child throwing a tantrum. It was different, uneven, broken, the kind of crying that comes from fear rather than frustration. She turned. Near the corner beside a closed storefront stood a little girl, no older than 6. Her pale blue dress was smudged at the hem, her small backpack clutched tightly in both hands. Brown curls framed a face streaked with tears. People walked past her without slowing down. They noticed. Then they moved on. Alara glanced at her phone. 8:48. She told herself she shouldn't stop. There were security guards inside the building, police officers nearby. Someone else would help. Someone who wasn't about to lose everything if they were late. She took another step forward. Then the girl looked up at her. "I can't find my dad," the child said, her voice trembling. Just one sentence. Alara felt something tighten in her chest. Not pity recognition. She knew that feeling. The hollow, panicked sense of being alone in a crowded place. The fear of reaching out and not knowing if anyone would answer. She remembered being 15 years old, standing in a hospital hallway staring at a door that was never going to open again. Before listening, please note that the following story addresses topics involving children, family loss, and personal responsibility. This content is created for educational purposes, encouraging listeners to reflect on presence, compassion, and the choices that may have a lasting impact on one's life. If you are not ready to engage with these emotions, please consider pausing before continuing. Alara looked back at the building. Then she looked at the girl. 8:49. The world didn't pause. Traffic moved. Phones rang. Life continued indifferent to the quiet moment unfolding on that sidewalk. Some decisions don't announce themselves. They don't arrive with warnings or dramatic music. They come quietly wrapped in ordinary moments, asking a simple question with an impossible weight. Alara exhaled slowly. Then she turned around and walked back toward the child. Alara knelt slowly so she was at the child's eye level. The sidewalk was cold beneath her knees, but she didn't notice. What she noticed was how small the girl looked up close, how thin her arms were, how tightly she was holding her backpack as if letting go might cause everything else to disappear. "It's okay," Alara said gently. She kept her voice low and calm the way her mother used to when storms rattled the windows at night. "Take a breath with me, all right?" The girl sniffed and tried. It came out shaky. "My name is Alara," she said. "What's yours?" The child hesitated, eyes darting toward the passing strangers, then back to Alara. "Juniper," she whispered. "But everyone calls me June." "That's a beautiful name," Alara said. "June. Can you tell me what happened?" June wiped her nose with the back of her sleeve. "I was with my nanny. She told me to stand by the window and not move. I didn't move. But then there were so many people, and when I looked again, she was gone." Alara's stomach tightened. "How long have you been here?" June shrugged. "I don't know. It feels like a long time." Alara glanced at her phone again. 8:51 a.m. Her interview was in 9 minutes. She forced herself not to think about it. Not yet. Do you know your dad's phone number? She asked. June shook her head. Do you know where he works? The girl nodded, quickly, relief flashing across her face like a small light turning on. Yes, he works in a big building, with lots of glass. He's the boss. Alara's breath caught. There were dozens of glass buildings downtown, hundreds if you counted the smaller offices. Still, something about the way June said it so certain, so proud, made Alara ask the next question. Do you know the name of the building? June frowned, thinking hard. It's his name, she said slowly. The building has his name on it. Alara felt a strange flutter in her chest. What's your dad's name, June? Callum Hale. The city seemed to go quiet. Not silent, just distant, like Alara was underwater. She knew that name. Everyone downtown knew that name. Callum Hale was the CEO of Hale & Cross Industries, the very building standing behind her, the glass tower she had been staring at only minutes ago. Alara looked past June up at the reflective facade rising into the sky. Her interview was in that building. Her future was in that building. And the man who could decide it was somewhere inside, probably pacing, probably terrified, probably tearing his world apart, looking for his missing child. Alara swallowed. All right, she said carefully. June, I know that building, and I know how to get you there. June's face brightened. You do, yes. I was actually headed there already. Really? Alara nodded. We can go together. June's lower lip trembled. Will you stay with me? Alara didn't hesitate, I promise. June reached out and slipped her small hand into Alara's. It was cold. Alara wrapped her fingers around it, instinctively warming it with her own. They started walking. June had to take 2 steps for every one of Alara's, but she didn't complain. She walked close pressed against Alara's side as if afraid she might vanish too. As they moved through the crowded streets, Alara felt the weight of her decision settle in. She was going to be late, not a few minutes late, very late. She imagined the receptionist's polite smile, the glance at the clock, the silent judgment. Unprofessional, irresponsible, disqualified. She imagined the email that would follow. Thank you for your time, but we have decided to move forward with other candidates. Her chest tightened. June looked up at her. Are you in trouble? Alara blinked. Why would you think that? You look like my dad when he's thinking really hard, June said. Like when he's worried, but trying not to show it. Alara smiled faintly. I guess I am thinking hard. Is it my fault? June asked softly. The question hit her harder than she expected. No, Alara said immediately. She knelt again, ignoring the stares of passers-by. No, June. This is not your fault, not even a little. June studied her face. Okay. They resumed walking. At every crosswalk, Alara checked both directions twice. She held June's hand tighter. The city suddenly felt sharper, faster, more dangerous than it had just minutes before. She thought about what could have happened if she'd walked away. The thought made her sick. June talked as they walked about her favorite cereal, about her dog at home, about how her dad worked too much but always read to her at night. My mom used to read to me, June said suddenly. Alara glanced down. Used to? She died, June said simply. When I was little. I'm sorry, Alara said quietly. June shrugged. I don't remember her much, but Dad says she was kind. Alara nodded. I believe him. They reached the plaza in front of the building. Alara looked at her phone. 9:17 a.m. She was officially late, very late. Her heart pounded as they stepped through the revolving doors into the lobby. The space was vast and polished marble floors, high-ceiling security desks flanking the entrance. Everything smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and expensive coffee. People in tailored suits moved with purpose. Alara suddenly felt out of place. Her jacket looked too worn, her shoes too plain, her confidence fragile. She guided June toward the reception desk. The woman behind it barely looked up at first. Yes, she said curtly. Alara took a breath. My name is Alara Whitman. I had an interview scheduled for 9 o'clock. The receptionist glanced at the clock, then at Alara. Her expression cooled. You're late, I understand, Alara said, but there was an emergency. The receptionist's eyes flicked to June. June squeezed Alara's hand. I was lost, June said softly. She helped me. The receptionist's face changed, slowly, completely. What's your name, sweetheart? She asked. Juniper Hale. The color drained from the woman's face. She stood so abruptly her chair rolled back. One moment, she said, already reaching for the phone. Alara's heart hammered. She didn't know what would happen next, only that whatever it was, there was no turning back now. The receptionist's fingers trembled as she pressed buttons on the phone. She lowered her voice, but not enough. Yes, she said urgently. She's here, in the lobby. With a woman. Alara stood perfectly still. June leaned closer to her, pressing her shoulder against Alara's leg. Alara could feel the small, steady rhythm of the child's breathing, slow now, calmer than before. That alone told her she'd made the right choice no matter what happened next. The receptionist hung up and looked at Alara again. Her tone had changed completely. "He'll be down shortly," she said. "Please, stay right here." Alara nodded, though her mouth had gone dry. Around them, the lobby continued to move. People checked in, elevators chimed. A group of executives walked past, laughing quietly. None of them knew that somewhere, above their heads, a man's entire world was coming apart. June tugged gently on Alara's sleeve. "Is my dad mad?" Alara crouched down. "No, sweetheart. He's probably very scared." June considered this. "He gets scared when he thinks something bad might happen to me." "That makes sense," Alara said softly. "He loves you." June nodded, satisfied. Seconds passed, then a ripple moved through the room. It started near the elevator bank, raised voices, hurried footsteps. The sharp sound of shoes striking marble, too fast for a place like this. Conversations fell quiet. Heads turned. The elevators opened. A man stepped out and immediately broke into a run. He wasn't running like someone late to a meeting. He wasn't running with anger or authority. He was running with panic. His suit jacket hung open, his tie loosened, his hair slightly disheveled, as if he'd dragged his hands through it one too many times. His eyes scanned the lobby, wildly searching. Then they landed on June. "June." His voice cracked on her name. June's entire body lit up. "Daddy!" She let go of Alara's hand and ran. Callum Hale dropped to his knees just in time to catch her. He wrapped his arms around her so tightly it looked like he was afraid she might disappear, if he loosened his grip even for a second. "Oh my God," he whispered, pressing his face into her hair. "Oh my God, I've been so scared." "I'm okay," June said, hugging him back just as hard. "I was lost, but she helped me." Callum pulled back slightly, hands moving over June's arms, her shoulders, her knees, checking her, confirming she was whole. "You're not hurt, no, I promise." His breath left him in a rush that sounded almost like a sob. Only then did he look up. His eyes followed June's pointing finger. "She's the one," June said proudly. "She stayed with me. She promised she wouldn't leave." Callum stood slowly. The room seemed to shrink as he walked toward Alara. Up close, he looked younger than she'd expected. There were faint lines around his eyes, not from age, but from worry, from responsibility, from years of carrying too much alone. "You found my daughter," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Alara replied. "She was alone and scared. I couldn't leave her." "You brought her here yourself?" "Yes. You were on your way to this building." Alara hesitated, then nodded. "I had an interview." Silence spread between them. Callum glanced at the receptionist, who looked like she might faint. Then he looked back at Alara. "You missed your interview," he said quietly. "Yes. Because you stopped for her." "Yes." Something shifted in his expression, not surprise, not relief, but something deeper. "Recognition." "Thank you," he said. The words were simple, but the weight behind them was enormous. "You have no idea what you have done." Alara swallowed. "I'm just glad she is safe." Callum turned to the receptionist. "Clear my schedule," he said. "All of it." She stared at him. "Sir, you have." "I don't care," he said. "Calm. Final? Cancel everything." Then he looked back at Alara. "If you're willing," he said, "I'd like to speak with you. Now." Alara's heart skipped. I understand if that's not possible," she said quickly. "I know I'm late. I know this probably isn't appropriate." Callum shook his head. "What wouldn't be appropriate," he said, "is ignoring what just happened." He gestured toward the elevators. "Come with me." June looked between them. "Can I come too?" He smiled, the first real smile Alara had seen from him. "In a minute. I'll have someone stay with you." He turned back to Alara. "Please." Alara hesitated only a moment before nodding. As they stepped into the elevator together, the doors slid closed behind them, sealing out the noise of the lobby. The ascent was quiet. Too quiet. Alara stared at the numbers ticking upward, trying to steady her breathing. She was acutely aware of how strange this all was. How thin the line was between disaster and something else, something she didn't dare name yet. Callum broke the silence. "Most people wouldn't have stopped," he said. Alara glanced at him. "I think more people would than you realize." He shook his head. "I've spent years watching people walk past things that don't benefit them." The elevator slowed. "I don't want to know why you're qualified for this job," he said as the doors opened. "Not yet." Alara frowned slightly. "I want to know who you are." he continued. Because that decision you made outside that tells me more than any resume ever could. The doors opened onto the executive floor. As Alara stepped out, she realized something that made her chest tighten. An hour ago, she'd been afraid of losing everything. Now she was standing at the edge of a moment that might change her life completely, and she had no idea which way it would go. The executive floor felt different from the rest of the building. Downstairs, everything had been glass and steel, bright, sharp, efficient. Up here, the lighting was warmer. The walls were painted in soft, neutral tones. Framed photographs lined the hallway, not of awards or headlines, but of people. Teams, charity events, and more than a few drawings clearly made by a child. Alara noticed them immediately. Crayon sons. Stick figure families. A small dog with impossibly long legs, each one signed in uneven handwriting, June. Callum noticed her looking. She insists I hang everyone, he said. Says they keep me from forgetting what matters. Alara smiled faintly. She's very wise. He didn't disagree. They reached the corner office. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city, the river catching the light in the distance. Callum opened the door and gestured for her to enter first. Please, he said. Alara stepped inside, suddenly aware of how quiet it was. No ringing phones, no assistants hovering nearby. Just the hum of the city far below. Would you like some water? He asked. Yes, thank you. He poured 2 glasses from a carafe on a side table and handed one to her before sitting across from her desk, not behind it. That small detail didn't escape her. He wasn't positioning himself above her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Alara held the glass with both hands, grounding herself. Her heart was still racing, but not the frantic panic from earlier. This felt different, heavier, more deliberate. Callum broke the silence. I was in a meeting when I got the call, he said quietly. Quarterly projections, market expansion, the usual things people think matter. He paused, eyes unfocused as if replaying the moment. My assistant walked in without knocking. She never does that. Not in 10 years. Alara listened, sensing this wasn't part of an interview. Not yet. She said June was missing, that the nanny lost sight of her on Maple Street. His jaw tightened. I don't remember what I said next. I just remember standing up. I remember thinking this is it. This is the moment every parent fears and hopes never comes. He looked at Alara, then really looked at her. You brought her back to me. Alara shook her head slightly. She helped me too. Callum considered that. How she reminded me who I am, Alara said simply. Another pause. Tell me about that, he said. Alara took a slow breath. This was the part she'd avoided for months. The part she didn't usually share in interviews. I grew up in a small town, she began. My father died when I was 15. Heart attack. No warning. One day he was there, the next day he wasn't. Callum nodded once. He understood that kind of loss. My mother did everything she could. Alara continued. 2 jobs, late nights, she never complained. But I saw the fear. The way it aged her. I promised myself I'd never let her feel that alone again. Her voice steadied as she spoke. The words felt old, worn smooth by time. I worked hard, went to college, built a career, and then 4 months ago it all disappeared. No warning, just gone. Callum leaned back slightly, listening without interruption. I've spent the last 4 months trying to stay ahead of panic, Alara said. Trying to be responsible, practical, focused on survival. She met his eyes. And then I saw your daughter standing on that sidewalk. Her throat tightened, but she continued. I knew what it meant to be alone like that. I knew what it felt like to look at the world and realize no one was coming. Callum's gaze softened. I couldn't walk away, she said. Even if it cost me everything else. Silence settled between them again. Finally, Callum spoke. I've interviewed hundreds of candidates, he said. Some of the most qualified people in this industry. He leaned forward slightly. But qualifications tell me what someone can do, not who they are when no one's watching. Alara's fingers tightened around the glass. You were willing to lose your chance to help my daughter, he said. That tells me more than any resume. Alara exhaled slowly. I didn't think about it that way. Most people don't, he said. That's the point. He reached for a folder on the desk and slid it toward her. Her resume. I've already reviewed this, he said. Your experience is solid. Your references are strong. You're more than capable of doing this job. Her heart lifted just slightly. But I need to ask you something, he continued. And I need you to be honest. Alara nodded. I will be. Why this role? Callum asked. Why here? She didn't answer immediately. Because I need stability, she said finally. Because I need health insurance. Because I need to take care of my mother. Callum watched her carefully, and he prompted. And Alara added, because I still believe work should mean something. I don't want to just survive. I want to contribute. To be proud of what I'm building. Callum leaned back, considering. You're not afraid to admit need, he said. That's rare. Alara gave a small smile. I've been afraid for months. Pretending otherwise stopped working. He nodded. There was a knock at the door. Callum glanced toward it. Yes. The door opened slightly, and an older woman stepped in. Kind eyes, silver hair pulled back neatly. June is asking for you, she said gently. She wants to know if Alara is staying. Callum smiled a genuine one. Tell her we'll see her soon. The woman nodded and left. Callum turned back to Alara. She likes you, he said. Alara felt a warmth spread through her chest. She's easy to like. She doesn't trust easily, he said. Not since her mother died. Alara hesitated. I'm sorry. I didn't know. It's been 3 years, he said. Some days it feels like yesterday. They sat with that shared understanding. May I ask you something personal? Alara said. He nodded. How do you do it? She asked. Carry all of this and still show up every day? Callum was quiet for a long moment. I don't, he said finally. Not perfectly. I fail more often than people realize. He looked toward the window. But June needs me to keep trying. Alara nodded. My mother used to say the same thing. Callum turned back to her. I don't know what this job will mean for you, he said. But I know what it would mean to me to have someone like you here. Her breath caught. I can't promise ease, he continued, or certainty, but I can promise respect. He extended his hand across the desk. I'd like to offer you the position of Executive Operations Manager, effective immediately. For a moment, Alara couldn't move. The words settled slowly like snow. Her voice broke. She cleared her throat. Yes, I accept. Callum smiled, not as a CEO, but as a man relieved. Welcome, he said. We'll figure the rest out together. As Alara left the office a short time later, paperwork in hand, she felt something unfamiliar settle over her. Not triumph, not relief, but dignity. She had walked in expecting judgment. She walked out knowing she'd been seen. And somewhere down the hall, a little girl was waiting proof that sometimes stopping doesn't cost you everything. Sometimes it gives you back more than you ever expected. Alara didn't fully understand what had happened until she stepped back into the elevator alone. The doors closed softly, sealing her inside, with nothing but her reflection in the brushed steel walls. She looked at herself, really looked, her hair slightly out of place, her jacket creased at the elbows, her eyes still wide as if her body hadn't caught up with her mind yet. She had a job, not a promise, not a "we'll call you," a job. Her phone buzzed in her hand. A message from an unknown number. Callum Hale. June would like to see you before you leave, if that's all right. Alara smiled before she could stop herself. Of course, she typed back. When she stepped into the small lounge near the executive offices, June was sitting at a low table with coloring pencils spread everywhere. She looked up and beamed. You stayed? June said. Yes, Alara replied, kneeling beside her. I did. June studied her face seriously. Does that mean you work here now? Alara nodded. It does. June clapped her hands once decisive. Good. That means you won't disappear. Alara felt her throat tighten. I don't plan to. Callum watched them quietly from the doorway. There was something unfamiliar in his expression. Relief mixed with something softer, something cautious. Thank you for coming back, he said. Thank you for letting me, Alara replied. June held up a piece of paper. It was a drawing of 3 figures holding hands beneath a sun that took up half the page. That's you, June said, pointing. And that's Daddy? And that's me. Alara laughed softly. I love it. You can keep it, June insisted. So you remember today? I don't think I could forget, Alara said. Her first day officially began the following Monday. Alara arrived early, too early if she was honest. Old habits died hard. She liked to be prepared. She liked to walk into a space before it filled with people and expectations. Her office was small but bright, tucked just outside Callum's. There was a plant on the desk and a welcome card. A neat stack of folders sat labeled in careful handwriting. We're glad you're here, the card read. The words sat with her longer than expected. The work itself came quickly, including schedules and briefings. She sat in meetings quietly at first, listening more than speaking. She learned the rhythms of the place, the unspoken rules. She learned who talked over others, who listened, and who noticed. Callum was demanding, but fair. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't micromanage. When Alara asked questions, he answered them fully. When she made suggestions, he considered them. That mattered. June visited twice that first week. Once she came with her grandmother, once with a new nanny. The nanny was a gentle woman with gray hair and patient eyes. Each time, June ran straight to Alara's office as if she'd always belonged there. "Daddy says you're very organized," June said one afternoon. She climbed into the chair across from Alara's desk. Alara smiled. "That's kind of him. He says that's important," June added. "But he also says being kind is more important." Alara paused. He said that June nodded solemnly. He said he learned it again. Something shifted in Alara's chest. Not everything was easy. She noticed the looks. She heard the whispers that quieted when she entered a room. She noticed the way certain conversations stopped mid-sentence. She told herself not to read into it. Offices had politics. People speculated. It was normal. Still, there were moments. A woman in accounting smiled too tightly. A man in operations avoided eye contact. A pause lingered too long when someone mentioned how Alara had been hired. She focused on her work. That had always been her answer. Callum noticed even when Alara didn't mention it. One evening, long after most of the office had emptied, he knocked on her door. "You don't have to stay late," he said. Alara looked up from her screen. "I know, I just wanted to finish this." He stepped inside. He leaned against the doorframe. His tie was loosened. His jacket was draped over his arm. "You're doing well," he said. "People notice." She hesitated. "Not everyone." He didn't deny it. "People talk when they don't understand something," he said. He added, "especially when it challenges the story they've already decided on." Alara closed her laptop slowly. "Do you regret it?" Callum met her gaze. "No." The answer was immediate. She nodded, letting that settle. They stood there for a moment, neither rushing to leave. "Would you like to get dinner?" Callum asked, his tone measured. "No pressure, just food." Alara smiled, surprised by how natural it felt. "I'd like that." They went to a quiet restaurant a few blocks away. Nothing fancy, warm lighting, comfortable booths, a place where people lingered. They talked easily about work at first, then about families, about mistakes, about the strange turns life took when you weren't paying attention. Callum spoke of losing his wife, of learning to be both parents at once, of the fear he carried quietly, the one he never allowed himself to voice. Alara spoke of her mother, of the nights she lay awake calculating numbers that never quite added up, of how tired she'd been not just physically, but in a way she hadn't known how to explain. There was no rush, no expectations, just understanding. The rumors began the following week. At first, they were subtle, suggestions, half-formed questions. Then they grew sharper. That Alara had orchestrated the whole thing, that she'd used June to get close to Callum, that she'd been handed a job others had worked years for. Alara heard about it secondhand, never directly. Always through pauses and sideways glances. She said nothing. She told herself that truth didn't need defending. She was wrong. One afternoon, she overheard two voices in the break room. She knew exactly what she was doing. People don't just stumble into opportunities like that. Alara stood frozen outside the door. Her chest ached, not from anger, but from disappointment. She returned to her office and closed the door quietly. Later that day, her phone rang. It was her mother. "I heard you got the job," her mother said warmly. "I'm so proud of you." Alara closed her eyes. "Thank you. I knew something good would come," her mother added. "It always does when you choose to do right." Alara didn't correct her. She wasn't sure she believed that anymore. But she knew this, whatever was coming next. She would face it the same way she'd faced everything else. Standing still, telling the truth, and refusing to let fear decide who she became. Alara first realized something was wrong when her calendar invitation disappeared. It wasn't dramatic, no warning message, no explanation. Just a meeting she knew had been scheduled gone. At first, she assumed it was a technical error. Systems glitched, schedules changed. That happened, but then it happened again, and again. By midweek, Alara noticed that decisions she normally would have been included in were being made without her. Files arrived later than usual. Emails that once included her name now skipped over it entirely. No one said anything. That was the worst part. Silence, she had learned, was rarely neutral. It was a choice people made when they did not want to be responsible for what happened next. She tried not to jump to conclusions. She focused on her work, triple-checked everything stayed later than necessary. She reminded herself that she had earned her place. Still, the tension followed her. It lingered in hallways, in half-smiles, in the way conversations stopped just a second too quickly when she walked by. On Thursday afternoon, Patricia, the senior executive assistant, who had been with the company for years, knocked softly on Alara's door. Do you have a moment? Patricia asked. Elora looked up immediately. Patricia's expression was tight-controlled in the way people got when they were carrying something heavy. Of course, Elora said. Come in. Patricia closed the door behind her. They have called an emergency board meeting, she said without preamble. Elora's stomach dropped. About what Patricia hesitated, then spoke carefully. About you and Callum. The room felt smaller. Elora stood slowly. What do you mean? There was a letter, Patricia said. Anonymous. Sent to multiple board members. Elora did not interrupt. She already knew. It claims, Patricia continued, that you deliberately staged the incident with June. That you manipulated the situation to gain access to Callum and secure your position. The words landed like physical blows. Patricia went on. It also suggests an inappropriate relationship, abuse of power, and potential liability for the company. Elora felt heat rise in her face, not anger, but humiliation. Do they believe it? She asked quietly. Patricia exhaled. Some of them are asking questions. Enough questions that they feel obligated to investigate. Elora sank back into her chair. An investigation? The word echoed in her mind. Who would do this? She asked, though part of her already knew. Patricia did not hesitate. Rachel Knox, the former nanny. She has been contacting people, Patricia said. Former staff. Vendors. Anyone who will listen. She is angry. She blames you for losing her job. For everything. Elora closed her eyes briefly. Callum does not know yet, Patricia added. The board wanted to meet first. That hurt more than she expected. When is the meeting? Elora asked. Tomorrow morning. Elora nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me. Patricia hesitated at the door. You did not do anything wrong. Elora looked up. That does not always matter. Callum found out an hour later. Not from the board, from Elora. She stood in his office, hands clasped together to keep them from shaking. They are investigating us, she said plainly. There's an anonymous complaint. Callum's face darkened instantly. What kind of complaint? She told him everything. When she finished, the silence that followed was sharp and dangerous. This is my fault, Callum said. No, Elora replied immediately. It isn't. It is, he insisted. They're questioning you because of me, because of my position. Elora stepped closer. They're questioning me because someone is lying. That's not on you. Callum turned away pacing. I should have shut this down earlier. The rumors, the looks, you didn't see all of it, Elora said gently. And even if you had, this still wouldn't be your fault. He stopped pacing and looked at her. I won't let them do this to you, he said. I'll fight it. Elora swallowed. You can't fight it for me. He frowned. What do you mean? I mean, she said carefully that anything you do right now will be seen as confirmation. Influence? Power protecting its own. Callum's jaw tightened. They'll say I'm using you, she continued. That I manipulated you, that you're blinded. That's ridiculous, he said. Yes, she agreed. But it's effective. He stared at her, frustration clear in his eyes. So, what are you suggesting? Elora took a breath. This was the hardest part. I think we need distance, she said. For now. Callum shook his head. No. Professionally, she clarified. And publicly. He ran a hand through his hair. You're asking me to step back when they're attacking you. I'm asking you to let the truth stand on its own, Elora said, without power behind it. The room was silent. Finally, Callum nodded once. If that's what you believe is right, I'll respect it. Relief and sadness tangled in her chest. There's something else, Elora added. He looked at her. If this costs the company trust, she said. If it puts June in the spotlight, I'll resign. Callum's head snapped up. No, I won't be the reason she's hurt, Elora said firmly. Not ever. Callum closed his eyes. You shouldn't have to sacrifice yourself, he said. I already chose, Elora replied quietly. A long time ago. That night, Elora barely slept. She lay awake replaying everything. The sidewalk, June's voice. The promise she'd made without thinking. I promise. Promises were heavy things. The next morning, the boardroom was full. Elora wasn't invited. She sat in her office, door closed, waiting. Time stretched cruelly. Every sound felt amplified, the hum of the air conditioner, footsteps outside, a phone ringing somewhere far away. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother. Are you okay? You sound tired lately. Elora stared at the screen. I'm fine, she typed back. Just a busy week. Another gentle lie. At noon, Patricia knocked. They're done, she said softly. Elora stood. What happened? Patricia hesitated. Callum's asking for you. Elora walked down the hall with steady steps, even as her heart pounded. Callum was standing when she entered the conference room. So were several board members. Their expressions were neutral. "Controlled, Miss Whitman," one of them said. "Thank you for coming." Alara nodded. "Of course, we've reviewed the allegations," another said. "And the evidence?" Alara said nothing. Security footage appeared on the screen behind them. Maple Street, the sidewalk, the timestamp. Alara kneeling beside June. The two of them walking together. Traffic camera footage showed their path through the city. Witness statements followed shop owners, passers-by, a security guard who'd seen them enter the building together. Everything aligned, no gaps, no manipulation. The board member turned back to her. "It's clear you acted without intent to benefit yourself," he said, "and that the allegations were malicious." Alara felt her breath leave her slowly. "The investigation is closed," he continued. "We consider the matter resolved." Callum looked at her relief flooding his face, but Alara wasn't finished. "I'd like to say something," she said. The board hesitated, then nodded. "I didn't stop to help June because of who her father was," Alara said calmly. "I didn't know, and even if I had, I would have stopped anyway." She looked around the table. "But this process," she continued, "has shown me something important. How easily truth can be questioned when power is involved." Silence. "I'm not asking for apologies," she said. "I'm asking for accountability." She turned toward Callum, then back to the board. "If I stay here," she said, "it's because I'm trusted, not protected." The board members exchanged looks. "You have our trust," one said finally. Alara nodded. Later that afternoon, Callum walked her to the elevators. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "Yes," Alara replied. "I did." He smiled faintly. "You scare people," she smiled back. "Good." The elevator doors closed. As they descended, Alara felt something lift, not the weight of accusation, but the weight of silence. She had spoken. And whatever came next, she knew this much. She had not lost herself trying to keep her place. The building felt different after the investigation ended. Not louder, not brighter, just calmer. Alara noticed it in small ways, the way people met her eyes again, the way conversations didn't stop when she entered a room. Trust, she realized, didn't return all at once. It came back in pieces, a nod, a question, a door held open. She accepted that. Some things couldn't be rushed. Callum didn't try to reclaim what they'd stepped back from during the investigation. He gave her space, professional space. He made space. It was one of the many reasons she trusted him. They worked well together, clean lines, clear boundaries. Respect where there had once been uncertainty. If there were looks exchanged across conference tables, they were quiet ones. Private, unclaimed. June noticed, of course. Children always did. One afternoon, June sat in Alara's office, swinging her legs while drawing. She looked up suddenly. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. Alara paused. "Why would you think that? You and Daddy don't laugh as much at work anymore." Alara smiled gently and moved closer. "Sometimes grown-ups need to slow down so they can do things the right way." June considered that. "Are you still my friend?" Alara felt her chest tighten. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Always?" June nodded. "Satisfied." Okay. That was enough for her. Weeks passed. Alara found her rhythm again, not just in the office, but in herself. She stopped bracing for something to go wrong, stopped checking her footing with every step. The fear that had followed her for months loosened its grip. Her mother's health stabilized. The medication helped. The relief in her mother's voice during their weekly phone calls became real, not forced. "I sleep better now," her mother told her once, "knowing you're not carrying everything alone." Alara didn't correct her. She wasn't alone anymore, not in the way she had been. The shift between Alara and Callum came quietly. No dramatic confession, no sudden decision, just honesty. It happened one evening after a long day. They stood by the windows in Callum's office, city lights flickering below. June was home with her grandmother. The building was nearly empty. "I don't want to pretend nothing happened," Callum said. Alara nodded. "Neither do I. But I don't want to rush," he added, "or blur lines that matter." Alara turned to face him. "Neither do I." They stood there, understanding settling between them. "I care about you," Callum said finally. "Deeply." Alara met his gaze. "I care about you too." No promises were made. None were needed. Months later, the invitation came quietly. Dinner. At Callum's home. June's idea. "She says it's time," Callum explained over the phone, sounding more nervous than he had in board meetings worth millions. Alara laughed softly. "I'm honored." The house was warm and lived in. Photos lined the hallway, June at different ages smiling, growing. A few pictures of Callum's late wife remained treated with reverence, not distance. Dinner was simple, conversation easy. Afterward, June disappeared into her room. She returned with a familiar piece of paper. The drawing. The one she'd given Alara on the first day. She placed it on the table between them. "This is still true," June announced. Callum looked at the drawing, then at Alara. "So, is this?" he said quietly. Alara felt tears prick her eyes, not from surprise but from recognition. This was not something taken. It was something built. The wedding was small. No headlines, no spectacle. Just people who mattered. Alara stood in a simple dress, Callum beside her, June between them, holding both their hands as if that was exactly where she belonged. Alara's mother sat in the front row, eyes shining with quiet pride. When vows were spoken, they were plain and honest, not about forever in abstract terms, about choosing each other, again and again. Even when it was inconvenient, even when it was hard, June beamed. "I knew it," she whispered loudly, causing laughter to ripple through the room. Years later, Alara would think back to the morning that changed everything. Not with awe, with clarity. She remembered the sidewalk, the sound of crying, the moment she chose to turn back. She understood now that it hadn't been destiny. It had been alignment, between who she was and who she chose to be. Life didn't become perfect after that day. There were still challenges, still fear, still uncertainty. But there was also something steady beneath it all. A foundation built not on honest luck but on choice. And that Alara knew made all the difference. Sometimes the moments that change our lives don't arrive with certainty or applause. They arrive quietly, asking us to choose who we are when no one is watching. Alara's story reminds us that kindness is not weakness. And integrity is never wasted. Even when the cost feels too high, choosing to do what's right can shape a future we never imagined. If this story moved you, please subscribe to Tales of Kindness. For more stories about compassion, courage, and quiet strength, like, share, and leave a comment. We'd love to hear how kindness has changed your life.